What's up, everybody? It's George Gabriel, and this is Scoring Tips, how to approach a scoring gig. So you've gotten a scoring gig, and now you're wondering, how do I approach this? What are the questions I need to ask? What are the deliverables I need to get? How am I going to approach this gig in general? This series aims to answer those questions. But the first thing to acknowledge is that you are the composer. You were hired for this gig because you have the wherewithal to make music to picture. And you have a style, presumably, that you've been chosen for, and that's why you got this gig. And so I always kind of default to that is my rule number one. I'm the composer. I was given this gig because I'm trusted, or they like my music, or whatever it is, and therefore I'm the authority in this little arena. Now, it's fair to say that a producer may have dealt with lots of composers and knows what they like and what they don't like. That's all fine and dandy, but you've been chosen for whatever it is that you bring to the table, and you need to trust that. You need to trust your gut, because whether you did a demo to get this gig or whatever it is, that is why you have this gig. So if you're ever second guessing yourself, just come back to that rule, like, hey, I'm the composer, I have opinions, I've been doing this, I understand what's going on, and I understand how I'm interpreting this picture. With that, make sure that you're able to support your position when they're asked, well, why did you approach it like this, or why did you do it like that? This producer or story writer, whoever made this, has got a backstory inside their head. They, as a writer, they might know tons of information that actually don't pertain to the actual cut of film. And you, as a composer, you're seeing this thing for the first time, and you only have the input of what you're visually seeing. You don't have the benefit of having that backstory, but you are the person who is going to portray what is actually there versus what is in the mind of the producer, and actually make it come to life in a way where the music supports the vision. So with that in the back of our minds, let's start with part one, the deliverables. What are the deliverables? They're the audio, the video, anything that pertains to what you need to make this score happen. Now, it's fair to say episodic deliverables and film deliverables might be two different things. Episodic will be shorter on a continual basis, and it's really important to set up the deliverables on episodic from the get-go to make sure that you're getting the right things from the post supervisor so that you have exactly what you need to score that episodic, because usually when an episode comes, you're hitting the ground running, you got a week to do the show, then you'll get another episode the next week, and you go, 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 go. With a film, it's a little bit different because it's a long play. So you need to make sure that the deliverables are right for that as well. It's going to be an extended cut. It's going to be longer. It's going to be bigger files, bigger sizes. And so it's important to know exactly what to tell the producers that are giving you this film so you can not shut down your machine with giant files. But in the end, they're basically the same thing. One's shorter and more recurring. The other one's longer and just one piece. The most important thing that you're going to ask for in a deliverable is getting the right kind of cut. Now, maybe you're not familiar with the way that they cut these things. Usually they're going to do a rough cut, and then they're going to do a fine cut, and then eventually they're going to get a locked cut. The kiss of death is actually when somebody says, hey, we got a rough cut, can you start scoring? The answer always is got to be no. And here's why. A rough cut is rough. Even the fine cut, the answer has to be no. So a rough cut is the first stage, a fine cut is getting more to time, and a lock cut is everything is locked to picture, everything is not changing, and that is the way that the end picture is going to be. And the reason why is, let's say you start on a rough cut, and then you do all the scoring, and you're 5, 7, 10, 12 minutes in, and then the next thing they're like, hey, we got a new cut on this, and we really want to give you the new cut, and by the way, that's scene number 4, it's not there anymore, or it's been totally changed. Now think about that. That is the worst thing that you have to deal with, because now it's like, well, how many frames? Picture works in frames, you're working in real time. It's going to go beyond frames, so therefore, if something is in 24 frames or 23,976, and they cut out 7 seconds and 3 frames, that doesn't really translate to a DAW. Because you can go way beyond frames, you can go subframes, and therefore now you've got tempos and time signatures all locked in, and now to try to fix that is a nightmare. Suppose they do that 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 times. You're going to spend so many hours just trying to retool your cut to get it right. Always score to a lock cut. I would even put a caveat in there, like I'm only scoring to a lock cut, and if you give me another cut that's changed, there's going to be an additional fee because that's a lot more time. See, a lot of times they're not thinking about that. They're just like, well, we're still nipping and tucking the video. It's like, nip and tuck all you want. Don't call me until you actually have the locked cut and you're ready to put music on this thing. Now, that might grade people the wrong way. You're like, well, no, I need you to start working on the cues now. There's an approach that you can have. Like, hey, I'll just come up with some ideas, but I'm not doing it to picture. And therefore, you can give them some ideas, but honestly, it's a waste of time. So beyond only scoring to a locked cut, the other things you need to ask for is a burnt-in visual time code window on that cut. Let me show you what that looks like. So this is a movie I did a little while ago, and this is the burnt-in window time code. This goes by hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. And the reason why this is really important is several reasons. Number one, you're going to spot this movie ahead of time. You're going to look at when you start a cue and when you stop a cue. So these numbers are going to guide your spotting session. Second reason, if they have notes on your score, like, hey, you know, this cue, can you just not do this or that? Or can we just revise that? And the cue starts at 12 minutes, 5 seconds, and 18 frames. That way they can pinpoint you to exactly where you need to go. A burnt-in time code window is essential for scoring. Now, the next thing you want to consider is what's the frame rate. You want to align your DAW to whatever the frame rate is in the video. If you're scoring in Logic, when you bring that video in, it's going to say, hey, this video is at another frame rate. Do you want to change the frame rate? Always change that frame rate. That way, Logic's frame rate is aligned with the video's frame rate, and you won't have any issues there. Another thing to consider is how they give you that video. If they give you an 8 gigabyte MOV file, that's kind of a problem. You don't really need a huge file. You don't need it in 4K. I guess if you're using it on a TV and you want to score on a TV, I don't score on a TV. I score on a little window on my Mac, and that's fine. But some people like to have that, I want to put it on a TV and get that real scoring experience. Totally fine. But I still wouldn't get the big 8 gigabyte file. Why? You're just slowing down your system and you're making it work harder to do the video work when you're really supposed to be just making a score to a picture that you don't have to have the 4K version on. So I recommend that you get a MP4 or something that is compressed, small, but still very clear that you can score to it without having to wonder, is that something that's pixelated? I don't know, is that a dog or is that a frog? Now, the next thing you really need to actually think about is the audio elements. Now, I'm going to say this is probably going to make some editors angry, but editors are not in the business of making nice, tidy sound mixes for composers. There, I said it. They're busy editing video. And I'm going to tell you some of the tracks that I've gotten when I've had to mix movies, they are all over the map. It's a nightmare to try to sort through them. In fact, sometimes you'll get temp score that's on a dialogue track, and then sometimes you'll get sound effects that are on a temp score track, and you're just like, how am I supposed to score to this? This is ridiculous. I have the dialogue, and then all of a sudden there's a back end of a cue that's been edited. This happens all the time. So it's really important to make sure you're very clear, like, I want a dialogue only mix. And if there's a temp score, I want a temp score only mix. And if there's a sound effects mix, I want sound effects only mix. Now, I'm going to tell you, you're probably not going to get what you want, but you need to fight for getting a dialogue only mix and getting a temp score only mix. And furthermore, once you get those, make sure you review them like in entirety, because you'll be like 7 minutes in and all of a sudden you're listening to the dialogue and there's like score coming in. You're like, wait a minute, there's score on the dialogue track. And now you're like, oh, how do I do this? I need to hear the dialogue, but I need to not hear the score because it's a totally different key, totally different everything than what I'm doing. And it's totally messing up my workflow. So again, just get a dialogue only to the video and then get a separate audio track that has the temp score. And that should set you up for a good experience. The other thing that you need to know in the audio realm is, did they license music for the film? And if so, did they edit that music? If the answer is yes, you need to get either the edited version or the original version. I recommend getting the original version and the edited version. In other words, get the temp score as it is when they have the songs. But the key difference between having songs that are licensed for the movie and temp score that is just things for them to edit to is to have them separated out. Why? Because you're needing to score into that song and out of that song. And you may need to be editing that song as well. I'm going to say something else that'll probably make editors unhappy, but sometimes they're not the best audio editors, so they'll have a bad edit in there. You are the composer. You're supposed to fix that. So that's why I always recommend getting the songs separately, getting the edited versions of the songs separately, and then getting the full song in case you need to re-edit the song. And if you can get some stems on the song, that would be helpful too. But you can wish for those things, see if it happens. But I find if you fight for these things in the beginning, number one, it makes the producers know that you know what you're talking about. And number two, it makes them give you the deliverables you're asking for. So when you don't get those deliverables, hey, I'm hung up, I can't score this until I get these things. So those in a nutshell are the most important things to get in the deliverables. Lock cut, burnt-in window time code, not a huge file, get your dialogue mix separate, married to the video, get a separate temp mix score, and if there's any licensed songs, get all those separately and get the full versions as well. That should set you off to have the right deliverables to start working on this project. In part 2 of this, I'm going to talk about temp score madness or demo fever. These producers have been pretty warmed up to this temp score, and now that's ingrained in the visuals, and you have to break that because you are now the composer on this. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Click the bell icon if you want to see future videos. And leave a comment if you think I've missed anything or if you think that I'm spot on this. And I'll see you on part 2 of how to approach a scoring gig.